I was panicked. I wasn't even sure what to do. Timothy was a don't-ask customer, so I had no contact information saved. No way to reach him, not even a cell number. That's when I realized I did have some hope. I got back into the truck and hauled ass to my office. I could get there in about 20 minutes, and I could check the caller ID, maybe reach him that way. I zipped out the long driveway and got moving as fast as possible, leaving the gate open. I didn't even think I closed the door to the old mansion, come to think of it. I got to the office in just under 15 minutes. I fumbled with the lock, having to stop myself for a second, and then calmly getting my key in the slot. I pulled the door open and rushed to my desk. I hit the call history on the phone and finally got a number. Out of state, of course, but it was from New York, which was fine. Probably the right number. I hit the speed redial while jotting the number down. My stomach dropped when it went directly to voicemail. I heard the message on the other end. You've reached Major Timothy Crestfall. Please leave a message and I'll get back with you shortly. Godspeed. I hadn't even caught my breath by the time the beep occurred. Timothy, please, you need to call me. Belial's threatening my family, my wife and kids, man. I gave them the water you gave me, but this guy, I don't think... I couldn't believe I was going to say this out loud. Might even make it real. I don't think he's human. Help me, please. I hung up and tried to call again. Direct to voicemail. Random thoughts ran past my frantic mind. He's a bit young looking for an officer, ain't he? My cell phone rings. It's a 1-800 number of some sort, calling me in the middle of the night. I was about to ignore it, but something told me I shouldn't. I answered the phone. This is Fred, who's this? There's a crackle on the other end. I think I hear something like a scream before it cuts out entirely. A young man's on the line. Sounds shaken. Sir, are you Mr. Fred McCarran? Yeah, who's this? This is your home alarm central monitoring, sir. We're getting alerts that multiple smoke detectors have alarmed in your home. We've connected to the fire department, but we're not able to reach anyone via the front panel in your house. Are you home at the moment, sir? I felt a little dizzy, but I stood up regardless and tried to make it to the car. Oh God, have you tried my wife's cell phone? Yes, sir, we've attempted multiple times. Are you home? No, I ain't home. The fire department's on the way, sir. Do you need me to stay on the line with you? No, I'm going home. I jumped out of the office, leaving it unlocked and getting back in the truck. At this point, I didn't give a damn about the speed limit. I put the pedal to the floor. I'm not even paying attention to the speedometer until I look in the rear view and see the police following me. I pull over, shaken, not even sure what's going on. What happened to my family? I keep thinking that they're going to be alright, that I gave the holy water stuff to them, and that they're going to be alive, and what did Chavez call that stuff? God's blessing? I heard a tap against my window, and I rolled it down quickly. The cop is gruff-looking, heavy-set guy. In a hurry? My voice cracks as I try to compose myself. Officer, I just got a message from my alarm company. There's a smoke alarm going off at my house. I got about 20 minutes to get there. I need to pass on this. The officer puts his hand out. License, sir. I curse and hand him my license. I hear him actually running to his car. I contemplated just speeding off right then and there. Scenarios going through my head of him shooting out my tires or turning the entire thing into a police chase. My train of thought is broken when he runs back to my window and gives me my license. Follow me. Try to keep up, sir. What? I'm confused by this point. I'm giving you an escort. I think I went pale at that point. The cop put his hand on my shoulder. Sir, do you need me to give you a lift? I looked at my shaking hand and just nodded dumbly. He opened the truck's door and took out the keys. He undid my seatbelt. Before I know what was going on, we're in the squad car, speeding down the street with the sirens blaring. I hear the radio chatter coming in and out, but I can barely understand it. He grabs his radio. Car 314, I've got a resident of 35 Locust Street en route to the scene. The scene? I'm still in disbelief. I can barely tell when we're on my street, and the car finally slows down after it's done running every red light and every stop sign on the way there. The car comes to a stop, and I scramble out. I'm half blinded by a sea of emergency vehicles, ambulance, fire, other cops. I think briefly that at least the alarm system did something after 10 years of monthly subscriptions. The heavy-set officer's already out, and parting the onlookers in front of me, stepping past the caution tape. He says something to the other officer, and I wander onto my front lawn. I stagger onto the lawn and see something smoldering. It's the remains of my house. Firefighters are working to put out the fire, but I look around frantically, trying to spot Sandy and the boys. I eventually found them. 3 body bags out on the lawn, sealed, 2 smaller forms inside, and another that reminds me of my wife when she would hide under the sheets. I feel pain in my knees suddenly. Apparently, I fell. I need a pair of hands on my shoulders, another roughly handling my arms and hefting me back up. My legs barely function as I'm led to the back of the ambulance. The heavy-set officer helps me sit down in the back. Through the white noise, I see a very bright light in my face, and a voice slowly coming through. Can you hear me, sir? There's a young woman in front of me with a stethoscope. I blink, finally shaking my head. Yeah. She moves the bright light back and forth, and I start to come out of it. I look to the pavement. They didn't make it out, did they? Her tone is empathetic, but practiced. I'm sorry, no. We did everything we could, but by the time the fire department was even able to reach them, it was too late. I did my best not to just burst into tears, but they came anyway. I suppress a sob and try to swallow it down. I blink a few tears out of my eyes and hear the female EMT walk away. I hear a few male voices approaching and look up. That him? Okay, I'll take it from here. You guys fall back. This might get ugly, you know. I shake my head, knocking a few tears out. Cops are going to be asking me questions, and I need to be composed. I dry my eyes, but it isn't working. I feel the ambulance shift slightly as someone sits next to me. Mr. Marcone? I nod, eyes still downcast. I'm Detective Benjamin. I've got a few questions to ask, mostly about your whereabouts when the fire started. He holds out a battered pack of cigarettes, offering me one, and I take it, accepting a light, before taking in a deep breath of that healing nicotine. I'm about to say something when I think how odd that name sounds. I hear a wheezing snicker, and the voice changes to one I'm all too familiar with. I'm kidding, Freddy. I know where you were. My head snaps to the left. It's Belial. He's sitting right next to me. Black hair slicked back above his pale face, yellow eyes, and 2 white teeth. His duster's still white, but in addition to the red tie, he has a police ID badge hanging from around his neck. I clench my fist, grip my teeth, but before I can stand to deck him, his hand is on my fist, and he's hushing me, pulling my hand down. Shh. I'm just delivering on a promise, Red Fred. I try to push against his hand, but it doesn't budge. Stop calling me that. We all call you that, Red Fred. You should get used to it. But I have to give you some kudos, Freddy. That's a dirty trick. The hell are you talking about? His grin seems to return somewhat. When I couldn't pull you towards me, I assume you drunk some of that sanctified water from the Guardian Temple. The Guardian Temple? Belial snickers, almost hissing. The place you were cleaning, Freddy. He took a deep breath, wheezing at his next words. As I said, you surprised me, giving your only protection against me to your family. Smarter than I took you for. I glared daggers at him, even with tears in my eyes. You see, Fred, normally what I would have done would have been to march up to your kid's bedroom, wake them up, and then take them to Mommy. I'd then torture her relentlessly until she forsakes you and the kids, and then promise her that in the end, her pain would stop in exchange for her soul. Chills ran down my spine when I heard him say that. He noticed, and this seemed to make him even happier. The strong ones resist, right up until I threaten to put the children through the same pain I'm putting her through. His grin, it's ear to ear and sickening. Then I take her soul in exchange for the safety of her children. Once that's mine, I remove the love she holds for her family, for God, make her just one of my little whores. And then she usually just kills the kids on her own. You know, for fun. He lights his own cigarette. I can feel the horror just washing over me. It almost never fails. Works at least 9 times out of 10. But you, Fred, you robbed me of a good time. You see, normally, if you drink a half bottle of that holy water, you're protected from possession and the like. But what you did, Fred, giving them your protection selflessly, that bumped the potency up, and it was something fierce. He shows me his left hand, the skin on his palm almost entirely black, his hand shriveled and shaking. One of the rings even falls off his finger and shatters when it hits the ground. He curses in some unknown guttural language as it happens. You see what happened when I reached out and grabbed your wife's arm, don't you, Fred? Burn like a bitch. Still feel it burning, actually. So, with me being unable to touch him, I had to take some more mundane methods of keeping my promise. Broke the doorknobs, nailed a few windows down, made sure they didn't get out as I burned the place down from top to bottom. You protected your family from me, but the house, that was a very different story. I'm gritting my teeth, staring daggers at Belial as he seems to be enjoying telling me all of this. His tone changed then, suddenly and fiercely. I've never had to end someone like that. It's so mundane, so dull, and knowing that their souls were saved as I did it. Smoke spewed from his nostrils as he huffed and wheezed. What a nasty taste you leave in my mouth, Fred. Smoke spews from his nostrils as he huffs and wheezes. He looks like he wants to say more, but instead he just stands. But you've been through enough today. I'll let you live for now. Unless you want to make it easier on everyone and just, you know. He slides a finger across his throat. The message, not wasted. Might be nice to do something ironic, you know. There's a tire swing in the backyard. Could hang yourself from it. He speaks, and I feel kind of woozy and confused. Maybe at the motel, take your toaster and take a shower with it. I shake my head. It feels like someone's shoving cotton in my ears, and I can only just hear his voice over the background noise. He breathes on in my ear now. When you think about it, what sort of man can't even protect his family? The only honorable way out is to remove yourself from the equation. Suddenly, he's gone, and I can think clearly again. The EMT is back, and she starts taking my vitals. I'm gazing up at the night sky, and I've got no idea what I'm gonna do. I feel like a passenger in my own body as the next week goes by. I work out details with funeral directors and lawyers and insurance companies. I get tired of hearing the words, "sorry for your loss." I'm bouncing between absolute sorrow and blinding anger, and I can't control which family members I snap at or sob in front of. By the time the funeral day comes, it's me and a few friends and family on my wife's side. I'm in a church, first time in years, and the organ's playing a sad old dirge while I sit on the front pew alone. My family wants little to do with me. Half of them think I burned the house down in a triple homicide. The news was leaked somehow about how the windows were nailed shut and the doorknobs were removed before being locked. I'm pretty shocked when someone in a rather nice suit and some pretty powerful cologne sits next to me. "We only just heard," says a pretty thick Latin accent, but it's a familiar one. I look up to see Chavez. Chavez, of all people, sitting next to me. He's wearing a pretty expensive tailored suit, too. Chavez? He points to a necklace of some kind around his neck. Temple charm. Helps you understand me, even when we're outside of it. I sit up, looking him over, extremely confused. Why are you here? Where the hell is Timothy? Chavez frowns. He's here, but I told him not to come to you yet. I know you blame him for this. No shit, Chavez. I looked around the church before Chavez put his hand on my shoulder. Where is he? Chavez shook his head. Now isn't the time, Fred. I was glaring at him. So what? You're his lackey now? I stare ahead at the 3 caskets, all closed. What the hell is he? Not what we both thought, was all Chavez could say. We're both quiet for some time before Chavez decides to piss me off again. I know how you feel. I glare at him. I'm out of tears at this point. I'm just in an angry mood right now. You know how I feel. Sandy and the boys didn't deserve this. She was an amazing woman, and the boys were good kids. They didn't deserve this, and it's because of me getting mixed up with Timothy's bullcrap, or whatever it was. So don't give me that I know how you feel nonsense. You don't have a clue. Chavez was silent as he looked ahead at the caskets. When I was in Honduras, I helped the cartel smuggle drugs past the border. I would build chairs and tables and the like. They hide the coke in them, and I made the trapdoors. One day, my trapdoors all started to get found. One day, the cartel comes to me, and they tell me that they're going to try something new. They want me to make crucifixes and hide the drugs in them. They tell me the drugs won't be found as easy because people won't check crucifixes. He makes a sign of the cross over his heart as he says it. I refuse. I tell them I'm going to leave. I promise not to tell the police, but I tell them I'm done. The next day, I wake up with a bag on my head. I think they're going to kill me, you know? I make my peace with God and accept my fate. They bring me to a river. Along with it, they have my mother and my father, my wife, my daughter, all lined up. His normally happy face turns mournful. They don't even give me a chance. They execute my family in front of me, throw them in the river. They tell me, you live for the cartel, or you die for the cartel. I just looked away at that point. Chavez leaned back in his pew, now looking at me. You get to bury your family, Fred. Be happy for that. I'll never have that right. It was stolen from me. I turned back to him. His story is probably worse than my own. Not that I'm weighing tragedies or anything. Chavez, you never answered me. Why are you even here right now? Chavez looked around as if searching for someone. Fred, you always helped me out. You gave me a job. Gave me a ride to my place when I needed it. I'm here because I'm your friend. As a man, I usually leave crying for the macho stuff. Grand Canyons and funerals and the like. I guess this was an exception, though. Of all the people who'd show up when I needed them, if you told me it would be George Chavez, the illegal immigrant who's the best guy I know with a sandblaster, I'd have never believed you. Now I'm sobbing next to a guy, and he's doing his best to comfort me. Chavez even volunteered to be a pallbearer at the end of the ceremony. At the graveyard, he's the last one to stand with me. I turn to him, and I'm still swinging between deep depression and seething anger. Chavez, how can you still believe in God? He took everything from you, and yet you're still so faithful. Chavez starts to unbutton his jacket as he talks. When the cartel killed my family, they forced me to be their runner. One day, during a drop, I see a hole in the border fence to America. I think to myself, I can live in the cartel, or I can die free. I prayed to God and asked him to protect me during my escape. Then I ran. He reveals his chest. There's a hole just below his rib cage, on the right, and it looks like a bullet wound. It missed my heart, it missed my lungs. Didn't even hit a bone. It's a 1 in a million shot. It's a miracle, Fred. God protected me. That's why you should thank him every day. He tapped the scar as if for emphasis. Thank him? Chavez, where was he when Sandy and the boys needed help? Where was God? Why didn't he help them? Did you ask him for help, Fred? Chavez looked me dead in the eye as he buttoned up his shirt. I'm silent and just stare ahead of me, past the graves. It can't possibly be that simple, I tell myself. That whole ask and you shall receive nonsense. After a while, Chavez leaves my side. A few minutes later, I hear someone walking up behind me. I look, still facing ahead, and see Timothy in a black trench coat and a suit with a black tie. You got some balls, man, I said curtly. I never intended for this. What you did to protect them was, well, it was beyond what I thought you could do. He had said it with a smile, but now it faded off his face. If I had known you had a family, I'd have given you some other tools. I turned and marched right up to him, despite that he didn't flinch at my gaze. Yeah, your tools were really useful. I gave my wife and my boys that sacred water, and it just gave them a quicker death. It saved their souls, Fred. Because of you, your wife's soul isn't in the possession of Belial. Neither are your children's. Bullshit! That's not how that shit works. You don't lose your soul if a demon possesses you. Sometimes you die, but I know enough about that shit to know that you're just bullshitting me. I talked to the friggin' priest. You think Belial is a demon? I took a step back. Well, what else could he be? Timothy's face didn't change expressions in the least. Belial was the first dark angel, long ago. He was tasked with punishing impure souls. That was before the war, though. Timothy looked at the sky. I looked up there with him. What war? The war between the cherubim and the seraphim. The cherubim were a high order of angels, created by God to be his servants. But they allied themselves with Lucifer. The war began when Belial talked Lucifer into defying God in the first place. I was pretty dumbfounded at this point. I looked at the graves of my family for a moment. Why does such a big shot from down below give a crap about anything that happens here? The amber you spoke of, it has enormous power. Power enough where if Belial got his hands on it, he'd be able to pull himself into our world. Pull himself? Newsflash, Timothy, he's already here. Timothy shook his head. Belial is only possessing a man now. That's why the first day he didn't just kill you and take the amber. The man he had possession of was still resisting him, still fighting. At that stage of early possession, a spirit cannot make someone do something they don't wish to do. It wasn't until the next day when his will faltered and Belial gained full control. Still, even in full control, only a wisp of his power can go through the vessel. Timothy gave an odd smile to that. Belial, with the amber, would have brought himself into this world completely, and as a full-powered cherubim, would have laid waste to everything. So, Fred, he said, beaming at me, you saved the world in keeping it from him. I looked away from Timothy, not knowing how to feel about that. Yeah, it only cost my family their lives. Their souls are safe, and Belial's still out there. He's still gonna mess with me, isn't he? I imagine he's none too pleased that you protected your family from him. He's likely going to continue tormenting you. Plan on doing anything about it? Or am I gonna have to get a spot next to Sandy here for my protection? Do you plan on asking? I turned, my face turning red, but I just didn't have the energy for it. Please, Timothy, help me get rid of this thing. Don't ask me. Timothy turned away from me and started walking again. Who the hell do I ask? I shouted. Timothy ignored me and continued to walk away. I turned to face the graves again, maybe get a hint. I looked around and cleared my throat. Hey, God, mind giving me a hand here? Chavez's hand was on my shoulder suddenly. Do you know how to ask, Fred? I shook my head and Chavez just smiled. I'll show you. He got on his knees and started. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Your kingdom come, your will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we also forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. I slowly got to my knees and repeated. Chavez whispered next to me, Now ask, and in the end, say Amen. Chavez got up and left after that. Still on my knees, feeling rather awkward, I continued. God, I I know I'm kind of a stranger these days, but I need help. This Belial guy, he's killed my family. I need justice. Help me get rid of him." I hoped that was enough and finished with "Amen." Suddenly, there was a deep voice above me. "Fred Marcone." I looked up, seeing only the silhouette of a male figure above me. Suddenly, I was pulled up onto my feet, and I saw several officers as well as the detective who had said my name. The guy looks like an off-season weightlifter who's been shoved into a detective's uniform. He was bald, and his voice was deeper than I'm used to hearing on somebody. "You're under arrest for suspicion of murder, arson, and conspiracy to commit fraud." Great. As far as last words before being arrested went, I guess those were pretty lame. I let him cuff me, and as I'm led away from my family's graves, I spot him. He's dressed in his usual white duster and red tie, wearing his police badge again. The detective yells, "Hey Ben, we got your collar. You were right. He did hang around here longer than everyone else." Belial smiled as he greeted his fellow officers. "Good work. Didn't think he'd be hard. He sure did leave a lot of evidence behind." He smiled at me, using his false human voice as he spoke to the other officers. "We're gonna have a lot of fun with you." Thanks, God, I think to myself as I'm being shoved into a squad car. I look out the window and see the detective walk away with Belial. Then Timothy comes out from behind a nearby tree. Timothy stares Belial down, and Belial turns to face him. They contrast each other oddly. Timothy in his black trench coat and Belial in white. Not the right matchup, I think. They say a few things to each other, though I'm not really sure what they say. "Leave" is what I can make out from Timothy. Belial seems to laugh, but I can't hear what he's saying. All I can do is watch his lips as he says "mother" at some point. Timothy seems to narrow his eyes and get serious. "Kick his ass, Timothy," I think to myself, as I watch with bated breath as the two square off in the graveyard. Timothy seems calm and collected, Belial grinning ear to ear. I look back and forth between the two, and my heart skips a beat with what happens next. Belial makes a sudden step towards Timothy in a rapid, jerky motion, and then falls back where he was. Timothy flinches, causing Belial to laugh, before turning away and walking back to an unmarked car with the other detectives. Great, I think to myself. My guardian angel's a wuss. Good evening, everyone. It's me, Dr. Plague. Thank you so much for joining me for tonight's story. If you hear fireworks in the background, yes, I did record this on the 4th of July, so probably have a little bit of background noise in the story, too. I would have recorded it sooner, but it's been a very long weekend, and this was quite a big story. Well, the time is finally upon us. If you'd like to go to Amazon and get my new book, Compilation 4, Sleepless Hours, go right ahead. It's $9.99 on Amazon, or you can always get in touch with me, and I've got signed copies for $15 plus shipping. So, whatever route you'd like to take, go right ahead. Speaking of, let's go ahead and thank our patrons. Thanks to Leslie Lou Riddle and Janet for being our Spooky Skeleton tier contributors. Thanks to Xaronana and our newest patron, Emily Coltsfoot, for being our Ghostly Reader tier contributors. And thanks as always to Glen Jenkins for being our Ghost Rider tier contributor. If you're enjoying this story, then send Glen a thanks, because this is one of the ones he suggested. If you'd like to join the show, come on down to Patreon. For just $5 a month, you too can be one of my Spooky Skeleton tier contributors and have your name read out at the end of every TikTok and every YouTube video I do. Contributors also get their stories a day early, and they can suggest a story for me to read, so come on down and see what all the fuss is about. And as always, thanks for stopping by. Dr. Plague, signing off. Have a wonderful evening and a spooky 4th of July.